In this video, we are going to go ahead and get our player 1 throwing the ball. So we are going to use our Q key, and we're going to do a key press. So rather than using key down. So we don't want it to continuously throw balls, which would happen if we used key down. We're going to use key press instead. So the player has to press that key to get our player 1 to throw the ball. We are going to create an instance of object ball 1. So we are going to name this inst ball 1, so we know it's the instance, and we're going to use this method here. So the method is going to be instance underscore create underscore depth. It is going to have these things over here are called parameters. It is going to have an X parameter, and that is the X position of our player 1, because that's the object that we're going to code. We are going to have the Y position of player 1. The next thing is of the depth. We are only using one plane here, so we are going to use 0 for this. And then we need to know what object our player is going to throw. So the object that it's going to throw is obj, and actually we named this a little bit different in this program. So it is obj ball 1. We use that camel case notation. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to go over here. We are going to, and if your panel disappears over on the right hand side here, all you have to do is click on these arrows and it'll show up for you. So we want to go to player 1, and the event that we're going to have is pressing the Q key. So we're going to go to add event, and this time we're going to use key pressed. We're going to choose letter, and I'm going to choose the Q. Okay, we're now going to go over to our actions. Okay, and in our actions, we are going to go ahead and add that code. So we're going to do an instance of ball 1. So I'm just going to use inst and capital BALL1. Whoops. That's not what I want. Okay. Equals. Okay, and we're going to do instance underscore create, and notice that this pops up for you, so you can either type it all in or you can just click on it. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this. We're going to do the create depth, and again you'll notice down here this is what we just talked about, the X, Y, depth, and object. Okay, so it tells you what you need to fill in here. So since we're in player 1, all we have to do is put X here, because it's the X position of player 1. Y is the Y position of player 1. We're going to use a 0 for our depth. Okay, and now we need to have the object that we're going to throw. Okay, so in my panel over on the right hand side here, you should have named your objects the same as I have them named. If for some reason you haven't named something different, you need to make sure that the name that you put in this instance create depth matches the name of your object exactly. So if you used a lowercase b, which you shouldn't have because we're using camel case notation, but if you did, you would have to match that exactly. So I have obj capital BALL1, and that's what I'm going to fill into this method. Okay, so I'm going to do obj BALL, and again it knows that I have this over in my panel there. I can go ahead and click on it. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to set a speed and a direction for this ball. So we are going to use inst BALL1, that's the name that I gave this. By putting a dot here, it kind of is saying the property of that instance. So the property that we want to use is speed equals, and let's make this a little bit faster than our players. So I'm going to make this 8, and we're going to give it a direction. Oops, INTS, ball 1. Again, we're going to use the dot to say that we are getting a property of that instance of ball 1. And we could go ahead and do direction here. Okay, now we have a couple options here. We're going to use our equal sign. If we want it to always go in a specific direction, we could put a number in here. So we already talked about 0, 90, 180, and 270 being directions. And you can fill in values in between those numbers as well. Let's say if you are using more keys, if you are using a mouse or something else for this, you could add more than just those 4 directions. So if I did 0 here, whenever I play this, let me just show you real quick, it's going to throw the ball towards the right. Okay, so let me get my player moving, and I'm going to press the Q key, and it throws the ball to the right. Let's move my player over this way. My Q still goes up. Q. So it's always going to the right, no matter what direction my player is traveling. And in some cases, maybe that would be what you would want. In our case, we want it to be able to throw that ball in whatever direction our player is moving. So we're going to change this a little bit. So rather than using a specific direction, we're going to say equals direction. Okay, now this direction, we're not adding a dot on here. We don't have another object or instance listed. Because we are in object player 1, we're inside of that object, it is using the direction of player 1 here. And just as a side note here, in this language, it doesn't matter if you use spaces or not before and after your equal sign. I like to use the spaces just because it makes the code a little bit easier to read. So let's go ahead and play this again. And now our ball should be thrown in the direction that our player is traveling. So let me move my player towards the left, and I throw a ball, and it goes to the left. Move to the right, up, whoops, up, and down. It throws it down. Okay. One thing you might notice here, let me see, is it looks like the ball is like a little bit off to the right or to the left of the player. We could go ahead and fix that if you wanted it to go from the center by going back to our object or our sprite and doing that center on both objects, or I'm sorry, middle center. Okay, so that's it for throwing the ball for our player 1. So you can go ahead and use these same concepts to get the ball moving for player 2.